Mark, I'm afraid we have to let you go. The Orion project, it's failed. And all roads lead to your mismanagement. The words from Sarah, the HR rep, were delivered with the sterile precision of a surgeon announcing a failed operation. They didn't just hang in the air, they drilled into me, cold and sharp. Across from her sat David Vance, our charismatic VP of Global Operations, my mentor for the last 8 years. He had his elbows on the polished mahogany table, his brow furrowed in a mask of profound disappointment. It was a masterful performance. He looked genuinely heartbroken, as if he were losing a brother, not firing a subordinate. Mark, I'm truly sorry it's come to this, he said, his voice a carefully calibrated blend of authority and sympathy. I fought for you. But the board's patience has run out. The numbers don't lie. My name is Mark Jennings, 45 years old, and until that precise moment, a pathologically loyal senior project manager at Zenith Innovations. For nearly 2 decades since I was a fresh-faced graduate, I'd poured my life into this company. I solved the unsolvable crises, took on the thankless tasks no one else wanted, and believed, with a naive earnestness, in the mission. Vance had been my champion, my guide up the corporate ladder. He'd personally handed me the Orion project, framing it as my final trial before a directorship. He'd called it a savior project, a chance to turn around our struggling regional division and cement my legacy. In reality, it was a professionally engineered hit job, a gilded cage with a guillotine for a door. I understand, I said, the words feeling like sandpaper in my throat. Arguing was futile. The decision had been made weeks ago, the narrative already written. This meeting was just a formality, the final scene in a play where my character was written out. I walked back to my desk, the usual office hum of keyboards and quiet conversations replaced by a ringing silence in my ears. Colleagues who I'd shared lunches and family stories with for years suddenly found their computer screens intensely fascinating. They avoided my gaze, shuffling papers, pretending to be absorbed in urgent tasks. They knew. In the corporate ecosystem, everyone can smell a kill. You don't recover from failing a high-profile, VP-sponsored project. Especially one that had supposedly torched millions of dollars. With a methodical calm that felt alien to me, I began packing my personal effects into a small cardboard box. The framed photo of my wife, Emily, and our 2 kids, smiling on a beach in Florida. My worn ergonomic keyboard that had molded to the shape of my hands over countless late nights. The small, laminated project manager's coat I'd taped to my monitor years ago, a relic from my first mentor. It had 2 rules. 1. Document everything. 2. Trust nothing. A dark, bitter laugh almost escaped my lips. I had followed the first rule obsessively. It was the second I had forgotten. As I taped the box shut, Vance was standing by the elevator bank, his arms crossed. He was waiting for me. Mark, he said, stepping forward as if to offer a final condolence. I hope there are no hard feelings. Business is business. He offered a hand, a gesture of magnanimous closure. I looked at his perfectly manicured hand, then at his face, and for a split second, I saw it, a glint of pure, unadulterated triumph in his eyes before he masked it again with that sorrowful facade. He thought he'd buried me, erased me from the company I helped build. I didn't take his hand. I just walked past him, my box of memories in my arms, and didn't look back. He had no idea what a man with nothing left to lose could unearth. My loyalty to Zenith wasn't just a professional choice, it was part of my identity. I joined straight out of college, starting as a junior IT assistant. My boss back then, a gruff but fair man named Mr. Henderson, was a fanatic for process. The paper trail never lies, Mark. He'd drill into me daily. If it's not written down, it didn't happen. If you can't find it in 3 clicks, your system is broken. I took his words to heart. I became the company's unofficial digital archaeologist. I was known as the guy who knew where every digital breadcrumb was buried, the one who could pull up an email chain from 5 years ago in seconds. It wasn't just a skill, it was a habit, a quirk, an obsession. I documented everything. project changes, budget approvals, verbal commitments made in hallways, even casual instant messages that might impact a timeline. Every email, every attachment, every draft document, all were sorted, indexed, and often, redundantly backed up to a personal cloud sync I'd set up a decade ago. It was my safety net. David Vance saw my efficiency not as a quirk, but as a powerful tool. He plucked me from the IT ranks 8 years ago, seeing in me a perfectly reliable instrument. He made me his protégé. He was everything I wasn't: charismatic, sharp, a political animal who could command a room with a smile. He preached integrity and strategic thinking in public, and in private he taught me how the real levers of power were pulled. I looked up to him. I trusted him implicitly. When he offered me the Orion project 6 months ago, I was ecstatic. He called me into his corner office, the one with the panoramic view of the city. "Mark, this is your shot," he'd said, his voice low and serious. "You're the only one I trust to turn this monster around. It's a mess, but if you fix it, you're on the fast track to Director of Operations. It's your time." The Orion project was a corporate black hole, meant to salvage our struggling South American operations, a multi-million-dollar venture that had been bleeding money for years. My task was to streamline supply chains, renegotiate vendor contracts, and slash costs without sacrificing quality. It was a Herculean task, a thankless one, but I embraced it. I worked 70-hour weeks, taking red-eye flights to Buenos Aires and Sao Paulo, poring over labyrinthine spreadsheets, and auditing every single line item. The red flags started waving almost immediately, but I was too focused, too determined to succeed, to see them for what they were. Key vendor contracts had inexplicably inflated costs that Vance insisted were the price of doing business in that region. Crucial financial data often arrived late or in incomplete formats, always with a pre-approval from Vance's office and a note that read, "Expedite VP approval." I questioned him once, politely, about a sudden 30% increase in a logistics contract with a new, unknown company called Horizon Logistics. He dismissed my concerns with a paternalistic smile. "Trust me, Mark. I've been in this game longer than you. Horizon is a key strategic partner. They have connections we need. Don't rock the boat." So I didn't. I swallowed my doubts and kept working, relying on my meticulous documentation habits to navigate the chaos. Every change order, every new vendor, every budget adjustment, I created an audit trail so clean and clear that a first-year intern could follow it. I thought I was protecting the project. What I didn't realize was that I was meticulously documenting my own professional execution. The project imploded with cinematic precision. Unexpected shipping delays stranded millions in equipment at port. A sudden, crippling fine from a previously unknown South American regulatory body materialized out of nowhere. Budget overruns began to cascade, each one perfectly explainable on its own, but catastrophic in aggregate. Through it all, Vance played the supportive mentor. He was always available for a pep talk, always advising me to stay calm and focus on the solution. He praised my Herculean efforts in public meetings, even as he was quietly forwarding my grim status reports to the board, ensuring every failed metric was directly and unequivocally tied to my management. The final nail in the coffin came 2 weeks before I was fired. I got a frantic call from our lead partner in Brazil, Ricardo. He was practically shouting, "Mark, the payment for the Q3 shipment from Horizon Logistics. It never arrived. They're threatening to pull out and seize the entire shipment." I immediately checked my system. My records were crystal clear. The payment was approved by Vance's office and the funds were released 3 weeks ago. I escalated it to Vance. He assured me it was a minor clerical error on their end, and within hours confirmed it was resolved. He then sent me a follow-up email, CCing Sarah from HR, telling me to keep a tighter leash on the local teams and payment verifications. He was building his case, and I was handing him the bricks. That night, alone in my silent apartment, I stared at the ceiling. Emily had taken the kids to her sister's for a few days, sensing I was at a breaking point and needed space. I felt hollowed out, bewildered. How could I have failed so spectacularly? I replayed every decision, every email, every late-night conversation. The pieces just didn't fit. The scale of the failure, the perfectly orchestrated cascade of problems, it felt too neat. Too absolute. It felt engineered. Unable to sleep, I turned on my old personal laptop, a dusty relic I mainly used for my weekend carpentry hobby. I'd set it up years ago to sync with my work cloud drive, a habit born from a catastrophic server crash back in 2012. I hadn't looked at the sync folder in years. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just trying to distract myself from the loop of failure playing in my head. As I idly scrolled through years of archived files, a familiar folder caught my eye. Orion Project Drafts. My heart skipped a beat. I clicked on it. There, nestled among dozens of my own iterations and status reports, was a file I didn't recognize titled Orion_Proj_Plan_V1_Draft_Do_Not_Distribute.docs. It was dated 8 months ago, a full 2 months before Vance had even assigned the project to me. I opened it. The document was an early, internal planning proposal for the Orion project. It had budget projections, vendor lists, risk assessments. And at the bottom, in the document properties, under Author, David Vance. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just an early draft. This was the original plan, the blueprint, before it was handed to me to become my savior project. And the financial figures, they were drastically, criminally different from what I'd been given. Horizon Logistics was listed, but their contract value was a third of what I'd been managing. There were 2 other, reputable vendors listed as primary partners that I'd never even heard of. And the project timeline was 6 months longer, with an entirely different, more robust risk mitigation strategy. Then I saw it. The document had been autosaved by the cloud system during a session where a series of rapid deletions and revisions were made, a version control feature I myself had championed years ago. I could see the ghost data, the track changes that had been accepted but not scrubbed from the file's metadata. It was the raw, unadulterated truth. It detailed an initial, realistic budget of $12 million, not the impossible $17.5 million I was given. And more damningly, a series of consulting fees to a shell company named Vanguard Solutions Group, totaling over $5.2 million, with a comment bubble from Vance's user ID that read, "To be approved by DV for expedited release pre-launch." A quick search on my personal phone confirmed that Vanguard Solutions Group had a P.O. box address in Delaware, and was registered just over a year ago. Its listed director? A woman named Laura Vance, David's sister. I leaned back in my chair, the blood pounding in my ears. A cold, hard clarity settled over me. This wasn't a failed project. This was a sophisticated, premeditated heist. The Orion project was never meant to succeed under me. It was a perfectly crafted paper trail designed to absorb millions in embezzled funds, with me as the convenient, disposable, and utterly meticulous scapegoat. Vance had used me, used my reputation for diligence, used my obsessive record-keeping to build my own professional grave. He counted on me to document every step of the fraud he was committing, legitimizing it with my own hard work. I didn't feel anger. I felt a chilling sense of purpose. He thought he'd put me out to pasture. He didn't realize he just handed me the shovel to dig his own. The next morning, I didn't contact a lawyer. I didn't go to the media. I didn't even call Vance to scream at him. My rage was cold, not hot. It demanded precision, not just release. I spent 2 full days in my home office, methodically compiling the case against him. I printed out the original draft document, using different colored highlighters to mark every discrepancy between the original plan and the one I was given. I cross-referenced it with the financial data I'd archived, the inflated invoices, the records of missing payments, the paper trail for the sudden regulatory fines. I pulled up the corporate governance manual, a 300-page document most executives used as a doorstop, but which I knew by heart from a compliance overhaul project I'd managed years ago. It detailed the exact, ironclad protocols for reporting financial malfeasance directly to the top, bypassing the normal chain of command. Zenith Innovations had an internal audit committee, an entity so feared within the company it was referred to in whispers as the Inquisition. It was chaired by Eleanor Finch, a steely-eyed woman in her late 60s, known for her icy demeanor and a zero-tolerance policy for financial irregularities. She was old school, a company loyalist who despised the new breed of slick, charismatic executives. She and Vance had a long-standing, barely concealed professional rivalry. Vance viewed her as an old-guard obstacle to his vision. Finch saw him as a reckless showman playing fast and loose with company money. I knew the internal politics. I knew the audit committee was Vance's blind spot, the one place his charm wouldn't work. I packaged everything into a thick, unmarked manila envelope, the original draft plan with track changes visible, spreadsheets detailing the financial discrepancies, the corporate registration documents for Horizon Logistics and Vanguard Solutions Group, and a meticulously detailed, 2-page cover letter outlining how the fraud was orchestrated, with Mark Jennings conveniently positioned as the fall guy. I created a new, anonymous email account from a public library computer and sent a single, cryptic tip to Finch's executive assistant. Urgent. Review Orion Project financials. A detailed package will be on your desk Monday morning. Attention, Internal Audit Committee only. I drove to the corporate park at 7 a.m. on Monday, not to re-enter the building, but to a coffee shop across the street. I waited until I saw Finch's assistant, a young, punctual woman named Brenda, arrive at her desk. Then I walked into the lobby, took the elevator to the executive floor, and placed the envelope directly onto her keyboard. No name, no return address, just the undeniable weight of truth. Then I turned and walked out. He tried to make me an example. I would make him one instead. 2 days later, my phone, which had been deathly silent since my termination, rang. It was an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, a text message appeared. Mr. Jennings, this is Eleanor Finch from the Audit Committee. We need to speak with you urgently. This is not a request. I called her back. Her voice was sharp, professional, devoid of any warmth. Mr. Jennings, we've received some disturbing information regarding the Orion project. Information that implicates Mr. Vance in significant financial misconduct. I have no idea what you're talking about, Ms. Finch. I lied smoothly, sticking to the plan. I was just the project manager they fired for mismanagement. She paused. I could almost hear the gears turning in her mind. The anonymous tip mentioned a corporate scapegoat and referred to your unique and pathological record-keeping habits. It also indicated you were specifically targeted for professional sabotage because your diligence could be used to create a believable, albeit false, paper trail. My record-keeping is just a personal quirk, Ms. Finch. I like to be thorough. Indeed. Well, your personal quirks have provided us with a comprehensive, step-by-step breakdown of a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. We have original project documents showing altered budget lines, hidden vendor accounts, and direct evidence linking Mr. Vance to a shell company run by his sister. That sounds very serious. It is. We've already involved federal authorities. They'll be making an arrest this afternoon. We'd like you to be present. Not as a suspect. As a witness. I sat in the small observation room adjacent to the main boardroom at Zenith headquarters. A one-way mirror separated me from the drama unfolding inside. Eleanor Finch, her face grim, stood at the head of the long table. To her left and right stood 2 stern-faced FBI agents in dark suits. Across from them sat a bewildered-looking David Vance. He'd clearly been summoned under a false pretext, thinking it was a routine budget review. He looked confident, almost dismissive at first, leaning back in his chair. He thought it was some minor budget discrepancy, something he could charm his way out of. But as Finch methodically laid out the evidence, piece by damning piece, the original project plan, the inflated contracts, the wire transfers to Vanguard Solutions Group, the corporate documents linking it to his sister, his face slowly drained of all color. The autosave draft from my personal cloud was projected onto the main screen, his own deleted lines and comments glowing like a confession in the darkened room. He started to sweat, his bravado melting away under the cold, fluorescent lights. "Mr. Vance," Finch said, her voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. "You deliberately set up the Orion project to fail, siphoning off over $5 million through fraudulent vendors and engineering a scenario where Mr. Mark Jennings would take the fall. Is that correct?" Vance stammered, tried to deny, tried to bluster. "This is outrageous. These are fabrications. A disgruntled employee's baseless accusations." But his eyes kept darting to the screen, to his own deleted handwriting, to the undeniable proof. One of the FBI agents stepped forward, placing a file on the table. "Mr. Vance, we have substantial evidence, including sworn testimony from the real CEO of a legitimate logistics firm who confirms you leveraged his company's name for your Horizon Logistics scheme. We also have a full confession from your sister. She's agreed to cooperate in exchange for a plea." That was the breaking point. Vance visibly sagged, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. The fight went out of his eyes, replaced by a dawning, hollow look of pure terror. He was arrested on the spot, his hands cuffed behind his back. The agents led him out of the boardroom, a stunned silence left in his wake. As he was escorted past the observation room, his eyes, by some cruel twist of fate, met mine through the one-way glass. The look of utter defeat, of betrayal and disbelief that his meticulous plan had been unraveled by the very man he'd chosen as his fool, was colder, clearer, and far more satisfying than any shouting match or confrontation could ever have been.